I've been a professional psychic for over 45 years. And when I lecture and or teach workshops, one of the first questions that people ask me is, were you born psychic? When did you discover you were psychic? And they want to hear what I call my story. Many, many psychics are born that way. At the age of 3, 4, 5, whatever, they, begin making predictions and they come true or whatever. It's obvious they are psychic. Maybe they see auras. Other psychics have developed, well, I can't even say developed because it happens spontaneously. They have fallen. I believe Peter Herkos was one of those. Fallen off a roof, hit their head, and it's always a head injury, and immediately after discovered that they were psychic. Well, my story doesn't fit into either one of those categories. At about the age of 12, I bought a magazine actually on astrology, and it had the word psychic in it and so on. And I immediately became aware of the fact that it was logical to me that, we have a capacity, even at 12 I knew that, for much more than we were producing, much more than we knew about. It made sense to me, it was logical to me that there was psychic ability in the world. So I began to read books on psychic things. I quickly discovered that my friends and relatives didn't believe in this stuff, so I kept quiet about it. And in my early 20s, I went to a couple psychics. Some psychics gave me a good reading, some mediocre, some excellent. And at that time, my paradigm was that I believed that psychic ability was a gift that some people have and the rest of us did not. And we would go to people like that and they would tell us what they saw or felt or however they got their information. Well, I went to this psychic. I was 29 years old. I went to this psychic because things were happening in my life that were very, very difficult for me, and I needed some insights into what was going to happen. And I had been to this psychic before, and he had really given me excellent readings before. But this time he began to tell me things like, you're very, very psychic. You're going to travel and teach other people how to develop their psychic ability. You're going to work with men in white coats like doctors or scientists, and you're going to write a book. Well, inwardly, I'm thinking, boy, is he ever off today. And I could accept the fact that psychics had off days. Artists do, writers do, everybody has off days. But he probably still had to pay his rent, so he needed to do the readings, etc. That was fine with me. But either by body language or his psychic ability, he could tell I wasn't really buying this time. And so he took my hand and he took me over to a woman who was waiting for a reading from him. And he said, give me your watch. And he took her watch and he handed it to me. He said, you can do psychometry. Well, I knew what psychometry was. Taking an object that belongs to someone else, holding it, and through that wondrous mechanism of the mind, be able to get information about the person's past, present, future, physical problems, past lives, etc. I knew what psychometry was, and I also knew I couldn't do it. Psychic ability was a gift. Some people had it, the rest of us did not. So to get out of this embarrassing, uncomfortable situation, I took her watch and I looked at this woman and I thought, what kind of a story would fit this woman? So I began to make up a story about her. I said, you have a daughter and you're having a problem with the relationship with your daughter. And I told her basically what the problem was, what might improve it. I told her her husband had left her or died 3 years before this, 3.5 years before this. I forgot which it was. I think he died. And on and on and on. And I told her maybe 15, 17 things. And she said yes to everything. I paid my money to the psychic and I left. And I left there thinking probably what you would be thinking. As much as I believe in psychic ability, she was programmed to say yes to everything I said because she probably thought I was a visiting psychic. And so being a true believer, she would say yes no matter how wrong it was. So I had that all figured out and went home, etc. Forgot about it, it had nothing to do with my life. And a couple months later, I was at a party, and this woman and I discovered that we had read the same Edgar Cayce books. Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic, of our century. And I said, you want to hear a funny story? So I told her about my visit to the psychic, what happened, etc. Isn't this funny? And she thought it was great. She said, well, you don't know anything about me. Here, take my watch and tell me something. And she said, I'm going to be moving, in next month. She said, describe the place where I'm going to move. So I took her watch and I made up a story. Well, I said, I'm standing on a different level. It's a split level. And she said, no, it's 2-story. I said, I'm standing in the doorway of the living room, and the far wall is the door that goes to the bedrooms. She said, no, the door that goes to the bedrooms is on the right wall. I said, no, that's a solid wall. And I went on and said other things, which she said no to. But then I laughed, and I said, you know, it's funny, because I can see a faded slipcover on the couch, and I began to describe the faded slipcover. And she got this very funny look on her face, and she said, do you know what you just did? And I said, no. She said, I lived on Long Island. 3 months ago, my husband came home. I lived in that split level house. My husband came home, said he was in love with someone else. He wanted a divorce. I was forced to move out of that house, sell the house. In fact, our last argument was about that faded slipcover. Well, I was stunned. I mean, psychic ability is something some people have, and I did not. But on the way home, I figured it out. Before we connected, in my thinking, she probably, as people do, talked about her divorce and all the problems and probably that argument, because you can be talking about the weather, and if someone's going through a divorce, somehow it'll get around to the divorce. And I wasn't aware of listening to her, but I probably heard her. Then a few general statements about living rooms, and we thought I had done a reading for her. So I forgot about it until a couple days later the doorbell rang, and as I always say, I didn't know who was on the other side of the door till I opened it. And there she was with a bag full of watches and rings and hairbrushes and handkerchiefs and so on from friends and relatives. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You sit behind me, you write down everything I say. When I'm done, then you give me the feedback on it. That way I wouldn't see her body language. I would know she was, you know, shaking her head, yes, no, maybe. And I sat down and I would hold a handkerchief and I'd make up a story about the person who owned that handkerchief. About 2.5 hours later, I said, okay, I'm done. Then I wanted the feedback from her. Well, some of the feedback she could give me, but there was some of the feedback she didn't know. She had a call. And I remember one was about this young man, and I said, his whole right leg is all white. She said, what does that mean? I said, well, I don't know. I just see the pictures. So she called him and she said, asked him, are you having any trouble with your right leg? And he said, I guess you could say that. I went skiing over the weekend, fell and broke my right leg. It's in a cast. So it wasn't even telepathy, if we can say even telepathy. So now I'm stunned. You know, I believe this was a gift I didn't have. Some people did, I didn't. It really rattled, shook my paradigm. So I thought, okay, what's going to happen? So daily now things began to happen to me. I saw auras, etc. So I heard that Cayce, the son of the famous psychic Edgar Cayce, was coming to Rosary Hill College in Buffalo, New York. And I went to the lecture, 400 people there. After the lecture, I raised my hand and I said, what does it mean when da-da-da-da-da happens? And he answered many questions and invited me to have coffee with him, the president of the college, who was a Franciscan nun, the board of directors, and the director of the Human Dimensions Institute, which was just starting and going to be housed at Rosary Hill. Over coffee, Hewlin suggested that Sister Justa begin doing research with me. She was going to start that famous research with the enzymes that she did, showing healers change enzyme activity. And so I found myself at a Roman Catholic college, in a nun's office, at a nun's desk with a tape recorder in front of me, people coming in, handing me watches, rings, hairbrush, whatever. I'd take it, look at them, and make up a story about them. And they had to afterwards give feedback on it. But I remember one of the things that occurred was as this one woman sat there, I said, I can't go out with this reading. I have such pains in my back, I just can't think. And she said, where are the pains? And I told her, and she said, well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to get a healing from Oscar Estebani, the healer that Sister Justa was doing research with. And those are the places in my back that are hurting. So anyway, she left, and the pains went away. So I realized I was picking up her pains, and other things like that happened. I was supposed to be there for 6 weeks with the research, and I was there from 1966 to 1974. So I always say, once you invite me, you can't get rid of me. As a result of that, Chester Carlson, the man who invented and owned the Xerox Corporation, was financing the research at the college. And so I found myself holding envelopes, inside of envelopes, coded, etc. And I would hold the envelope and I would just make up a story about whoever's handwriting that was. And I remember one that I did. I saw this man, and he was sitting there, and he had his face in his hands, and he was wondering if he could complete something. I could tell he was wealthy because I saw big bags of money tied with rope, etc., and big pieces of land. And then I began to get pains in my chest and down my left arm, and I thought, I'm having a heart attack. And I said, did this man have a heart attack? And being a good scientific experiment, no one answered me because they didn't know. It was a triple blind study, actually. When they broke the code, they found out it belonged to Chester Carlson, the man who was financing our research. So then the question was put to me, what is the prognosis of his health? And then I saw in my imagination, I saw a bar. That's clairvoyance. I knew, clairsentience, that bar represented 6 months of time. I just knew it. I saw him standing at the beginning of the bar, which was the date that I did the reading, and I saw him go, just about halfway down, and he disappeared. And I felt that he would be dead in from 3 to 6 months. Well, they said, should we tell him? But I knew that he had already made up his mind that he wanted to go. Well, 2.5 months later, Chester Carlson died, I believe, in a theater in New York City of a heart attack. And so it became obvious as I was participating in this research that precognition was one of the things that I had a great deal of skill in, so we set up some experiments with that. I also found that when I went home, my friends would say, I wish I could see auras, I wish I could do psychometry, I wish I could do this. And I'd say, it's easy, let me show you how to do it. And I would think, now what do I do internally? And I would explain it to them, and they would try it, and they found they could do it. Some mediocre, some very well, some excellent, some better than me. And so it became obvious to me that if we say intuition, ESP, psychic ability is a gift, it's a gift we all have. And so the more you pay attention to it, the more it can help you in your everyday living, in relationships, in investments, in where you want to live, what you want to do. It can help you understand other people better and yourself better too. So get going, pay attention to your own intuition. Start by meditating, sit quietly. If you're a person who can't sit still, do what I call meditation in motion. Take Tai Chi or yoga, or go for a walk in the garden and meditate on whatever it is you meditate on. Some people meditate on words or mantras, they call them. Some people on pictures, some people on sound. Find what works for you.